The war drums are beating as the testosterone-laden year of the cock, rooster, begins, and the boys get ready to show who is biggest and baddest. The biggest warnings are coming from China, which has seen many of its red lines crossed, at least verbally, by the macho-laden administration of US President Donald Trump. The fireworks could begin after February 5 as the Chinese New Year's holidays went down, Chinese intelligence and secret society sources say. As the Chinese have warned, if they make a move it will be unexpected and worse than you can imagine. The Trump administration, meanwhile, has been too preoccupied with redrawing the maps of the Middle East and dealing with ongoing our struggle in the West to fully appreciate what will happen if China makes a military move. Before getting back to what China could do, let us take a look at the new Middle East that is being created by the Trump administration acting in unison with Russia. What we see is the region being divided into three spheres of influence. One is Turkey with expanded zones of influence penetrating Syria and Iraq. The other is the Persian, Iranian, empire now extending into Iraq, central Syria, and Lebanon. The third is the Arab zone, including Egypt, the Gulf states, Sunni parts of Iraq, Jordan, and Israel. Militarily, the Russians and Americans have divided their spheres of influence, with Russia to the east of the Euphrates and the US to the west. The map below shows the new zones of influence in Syria. As many observers have noted, Trump has promised to destroy ISIS within a month, even as he promises undivided support to Israel, the main sponsor of ISIS, for their sponsor of ISIS. What is really happening is that the Saudi monarchy is going to take on the fundamentalist Wahhab clergy, who they secretly hate, while the Israelis will deal with fundamentalist Zionist fanatics, which are two sides of the same ISIS coin. The reward for doing this will be survival for the Gulf monarchies and new pipeline routes for their gas exports to Europe via Israel and Turkey. For the Trump regime, fixing the Middle East will be the easy part. Trump has announced he also plans to take on the hard part, dealing with the Federal Reserve Board, by hanging of portrait of Rothschild, Fed, nemesis Andrew Jackson in the White House, Pentagon sources note. This is not something the U.S. military government will be able to solve merely by marching into Fed headquarters and rounding up central bankers, or even by bumping off and long in the Rothschild family. It will rather involve dealing with China. Here is how a source close to the Rothschilds described the situation. The Rothschilds are embedded in China, and have been for many years. All of their gold and liquid assets are in China. Everything that happens is well thought out and planned long in advance. Chinese intelligence agency and secret society sources told representatives of the White Dragon Society last week that if China decided to move military, it would not play into U.S. strengths by seeking a naval battle in the South China Sea. Rather, they would take over North Korea, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and India in one fell swoop, the sources say. Since Vietnam would be a hard nut to crack, they will leave it alone, they say. CIA sources in Indonesia do confirm that millions of Chinese have entered Indonesia in recent years after the government of Joko Widodo, Jokowi, removed visa restrictions. The Indonesians are also still angry about the murder of President Sukarno by the CIA and subsequent quashing of a Sukarno/Kennedy plan to start a new financial system. For that reason, Indonesians strongly support a new Asian-centered world financial system. The Chinese say they are fully aware the U.S. would retaliate against such a move by closing the Straits of Hormuz and the Straits of Malacca and thus cut off much of their oil. However, the Chinese have prepared for such a contingency by systematically building oil and gas pipelines and reducing their dependence on oil arriving via tanker from the Middle East. The Chinese, in any case, use coal for 80% of their energy needs, and as things stand now, only a quarter of their oil imports would be cut off by such a move. Furthermore, they know the Russians have a population of only 10 million in Siberia and could only protect this vast territory from China with all-out nuclear war. The Russians, having been abused by Western powers for so many years, are also wary the sudden Western romantic appeal for a Christian, white, alliance. As one FSB source asked a WD's member in response to the new American friendliness, whatever happened to the BRICS? They were told the world was no longer going to be divided into competing blocs but rather everybody will be friends from now on. The bottom line is the Chinese are sure the Russians will stay neutral if they make the military moves outlined above. The Russians and their Serbian allies, though, are inclined to take revenge for the destruction of Yugoslavia by moving into Kosovo, Gnostic Illuminati sources say. This would allow the Slavic peoples to gain control of the vast mineral resources in Kosovo that were the reason Yugoslavia was destroyed in the first place, they say. The Russians also have some justice they want done in eastern Ukraine too. In other words, the Russians may decide to take advantage of the distraction caused by any Chinese move to settle some old scores in Eastern Europe. Nonetheless, the Chinese are pragmatic and know that a win-win solution would be infinitely preferable to the scenarios outlined above. For that reason, they support the WD's plan for a new meritocratically staffed future planning agency that would coordinate a massive East/West campaign to end poverty and stop environmental destruction. Such a campaign would see tunnels connecting Alaska with Eurasia, Japan regardless of and with Eurasia and Africa with Eurasia as well. The big projects would include turning the deserts green, replenishing the oceans with fish etc. The Asians also say they are willing to accept a Westerner as first head of such an agency as long as his or her successor was an Asian. After that, the job would go to the best person regardless of ethnic or cultural origin. Even if the US avoided provoking war with China, the Trump regime simply could not take over the Federal Reserve Board because the US dollar is not controlled by the United States. Over 100 nations, including Canada and most of Europe, are already in favor of the Chinese-led AIIB and have signed on to the new carbon quota international financial voting regime. If the US tried to unilaterally take this over, they would be isolated and soon find the wages of the US military spread out over 800 bases around the world. The alternative, and this is one this newsletter has long recommended, is for Trump to issue Treasury dollars controlled by the US government. These dollars could be issued in whatever quantities the government wanted to pay for US infrastructure, education, domestic military activities, R&D etc. Internationally it would be worth about half of the international US dollar. This would make US industry competitive again overnight and lead to a huge investment, tourist, and export boom for the US. By contrast, Chinese imports would double in price overnight. In such an event, the Asians have agreed the new future planning agency would continue to finance planet-friendly US military activities around the world. The only other alternative Trump would have would be to raise tariffs. But, if the example of Argentina after World War II is anything to go by, this would lead to a slow degeneration of an isolationist US into third world status. In any case, these are all issues the Trump administration will get further involved with after its power struggle in the West ends. On this front, Pentagon sources had many new developments to report. After Trump's visit to the Pentagon on January 27, the military may get access to a Brazilian missile base in the Amazon to stop Bush drugs cartels, ISIS, and do covert operations, the sources say. In addition, the sources report that a cabal base in San Diego was blown up on January 24th. In yet another development, after Trump's trip to Langley, CIA headquarters, and General Joseph Dunford's trip to Brussels. The CIA and Europe are now targeting Soros and his NGO, the Pentagon sources say. Soros the individual is probably dead, but Soros the Rothschild Front organization is now about to be dismantled as well, it seems. The other thing the Pentagon sources had to report is that with drug dealer Joaquin El Chapo Guzman singing like a canary, Trump may send feds to take over Chicago, the center of CIA-linked Mexican cartel drug distribution, while getting rid of Mossad boss Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. With all of these macho goings-on, it is perhaps a good time to imagine what a calmer, female voice would have to say. Would say about current events. It is a good bet her advice would be something along the lines of make love not war. On a final note, the visit to Antarctica has been put off for now. Thanks for listening and watching. Subscribe.